right. Well, my last um, episode was about my shop, and I said this would be about my home life. Um, Things aren't going so well on this front. Not that I felt that it was any of my problem, because that's the way most of us are, unfortunately. And at this time, I hadn't learned that I was part of the problem. I I saw things differently. I felt like my wife was basically lazy, and in some ways I was right. But she grew up differently, and so her ideas were completely different from mine. Um, I'm not going to say in the end though um, that she was right, because she wasn't. She needed to grow up herself, and she needed to be a harder worker. The thing I had is I had a pair of parents that worked together, as far as they both worked very hard. Um, they had goals, although I don't know what they were really. I don't understand them. Uh, but they wanted more out of life, you might say, than just existence. So, and my wife came from a background where they were, you might say, just happy to survive. And I'm not saying there's really anything wrong with that vision in itself. But for example, I mean, especially in this time period, I was still under the impression that when I got home from work, that my wife would have a meal ready. She didn't have to have it ready at the moment I got home, but she needed to have it ready the same time every day. Not for me as much as for my children. I mean, they need to be on a schedule. I believe children function better that way. Now, I'm not going to say that my mother's method was perfect either, because hers is guaranteed same time every day. The meal was ready. And as far as us children were expected to be there on time for the meal, um, you know, and that works out okay. It just doesn't have any, you might say it's almost like we're machines and not humans. So I'm not sure, and her methods were kind of that way. Well, there was no emotion on my side of the family. On her side of the family, everybody was lovey-dovey, you might say, even if they were mad at each other. Sometimes it got quite comical. Um, my personal life, uh, it was pretty much her family and my family, and that's it. Sundays, we'd go over and see my parents and eat a meal. Wednesdays, we'd go over to her parents and eat a meal. Um, you know, we'd see my parents more because they were only 2 miles away. And my parents had a swimming pool, so the kids got to go out there every once in a while and go swimming, things like that. And then my parents started a store, so they were then my father was around all the time, which was terrible, but it is what it is, you might say. But she had no plan when she would wake up in the mornings. It wasn't like she did laundry on a certain day or anything like that, or at a certain time. Uh, we'd be running out of food because she wouldn't go shopping. Sometimes we didn't have the money to shop, but there was a lot of times when I just didn't understand. I just didn't understand her way of thinking at all. And my way of handling the problem was just to yell at her, of course. I mean, that's going to fix it, you know. Um, I'd come in the house and she's there watching the the afternoon dirty shows, as I called them, soap operas, and I say, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm doing laundry." I'd say, "No, you're not." I said, "The washing machine is doing the laundry. You're just sitting on your ass." I said, "Why aren't you doing something? I mean, organize the house a little and play with my daughter, you know." "What is she doing?" "Oh, she's playing with the neighbors or whatever." Of course, and this went on for several, I'll say several years. In fact, one time, shortly before, oh, and I'm not drinking at this point. I haven't drank since we got married, and of course that means I also don't have any friends because all my old friends drank, and and we only got together to drink, so it wasn't. Oh, I mean, every once in a while, if they had a car they needed fixed or something like that, they'd stop by the shop. But for the most part, I was all by myself, and so when I go home, I just sit there and watch TV. In fact, MASH was the big TV show back then, the big hit. I watched it for several years, I believe. But one of the things that one time we were in an argument, don't remember what it was about. Probably the same old thing. She's on the phone too much with her mother. Oh, yeah, that's another thing. I had to have our phone number changed so that when she called her mother, it wasn't long distance. Because the phone bills are so big, it was ridiculous. And guess what they talked about? The afternoon dirty shows. The two of them would watch them and then predict what was going to happen. They talked about it. They gossiped about it um, like it was real. I know. I definitely have never understood that. So, and I want to point out too, we are going to church, and when I say we, that means myself and Jennifer um, go to Sunday school and church, and then my wife comes later and just goes to church because she's too busy in the mornings to be able to get up in time to get ready. That's her excuse. She's too busy. Um, of course, you can tell just by the way I'm saying it, I didn't agree with that at all. It was quite frustrating for me. Um, so, even though we're going to church, we're trying to learn how to get along with each other, you might say. And she's pregnant, of course, with Sarah, and it's getting close to Sarah being born. And one day when we're arguing, she says to me, "I liked you better when you were drinking." That shouldn't have been said. That started a series of thoughts, which I already was debating my belief in in not drinking, because I could see by reading the Bible that clearly people did drink, um, and beyond socially as well. So the day came for, well, Sarah was born, and I had to, and she was, I guess, staying at her mother's house for a week or so. Again, another C-section. So, she needed to be taken care of at least for a while so she could get back on her feet. In fact, I think her mother even came to our house for a little while. And which that was going to, I wondered how that was going to work out. Actually, it worked out okay. But I dreaded it because you just had to know her mother to understand with my background why that just I didn't think that was going to work very well. But things worked out. But anyway, one of the evenings when I had to drive over to her parents' house, I picked up a quarter beer. And you might say off to the races. I didn't drink a lot, and I think for quite a long time, quite a few years, I didn't get too carried away. But when I had a night that I was looking forward to drinking, I was looking forward to drinking. And so, so I should have stopped a lot sooner than I would, and that's just the way it went. But while I'm also now back to drinking, and I guess realizing that I'm drinking more than I should, I'm also realizing, just like with my machine shop, that I gotta learn things, that I gotta learn how to handle my customers and all that stuff. Well, I have to learn how to be a husband. And I'm gonna say, unfortunately, it might have been just too late, but it also was that she didn't get it, that she needed to learn something. And because of that, every effort that I made failed, because I wasn't going to wait forever for reciprocation when I did something decent for her. I wanted her to recognize it, that I've changed, and that she needs to, recognize that she needs to change. But I'm going to say that never happened. She never recognized her part in the issue. As she told the one pastor once when we were going for counseling, I just want him to love me like he used to. Well, first off, I didn't have the kind of love that she had in her memory. And secondly, she never did anything to, you might say, deserve, or for me to be able to go back and love her more than I was. I finally got to the point that I had to see something from her, and I honestly can't say that I ever saw that. I tried to do things like, rent a limousine, which back then that was not, it was just, you might say, getting popular, and take her out, for our anniversary, and that didn't really amount to much. I mean, we had a good evening. Of course, and this is partly because I didn't know what to do by myself, so I invited another couple to go along with us. I thought that would make it more enjoyable for her too, because we didn't talk that much anyway. So, but that also blew up my face because she used that as a negative. And it's that kind of stuff was just constant. Um, we, you know, we kept, you might say, trying different things. I ended up going to counseling with her. This is where we took the Myers-Briggs, and I found out there's very few people like me, and there's quite a few people like her. And and of course, people all loved her, so that didn't help my my argument when I would say there were certain things that needed to be different. She didn't see it that way because everybody agreed with her. So, the hell with me. So but we spent most of our time with her family and ours, and then with her family, drinking was okay. So I've started finding more excuses for us to visit her family. I don't mean her parents, just her parents. I mean like her brothers and things like that. And I'd take a case of beer along. That was my excuse to get it, and things like that. So on my, as far as my family life goes, the only thing I look forward to was having a reason to drink. There wasn't much other family life for me at all. I played with my children, and normally even when I played with my children, it was when she was not around, because she would get irritated with me because of the way I played with them. There was nothing wrong with what I did, but it bugged her. In fact, I think that it bugged her that when she would have to leave for like one of her Mary Kay things, then when she came home everything was fine, and it irritated her that she didn't she wasn't able to control the children, if you want to call it that, as easily as I did. And so she actually didn't want me around them because of that. I actually think she started making sure that she was around them more to have more influence on them. And she certainly never said anything good about me to the children, so I think that helps reflect how they act to me even now. But while I, was going to counseling, we were split up because they said both of us needed individual counseling, which kind of tells you that both of us were kind of screwed up in the head, Well, in the end, she didn't keep going to her counselor, but I did. And yet I wouldn't quit going because I was afraid that everybody would criticize me and say I wasn't trying. So I would go see this guy every week, and it would drive me crazy because I had to shut my shop down and drive to see this guy. And it just was very irritating to me because it cost me a lot of money, and he didn't live anywhere close. He was and it wasn't doing me any good because he just listened to me. In fact, I got to the impression that he just thought I was an unusual specimen because he never gave me any advice. And in fact, just what happened to end the counseling, because every week I told myself I'm going to tell him, that's it, I'm done. Well, one week I told myself that, and when I got there, we talked for a while, and he says, well, Kevin, he says, now that, we've had some had been seeing each other for a while. I just thought I'd ask you how you see things going. I'm kind of wondering what your opinion is of things. I said, you want my opinion? I said, well, now that you're asking, I'm going to tell you. And that's usually the only way I felt at ease giving my opinion to anybody, was once they asked. I always felt like when I volunteered it went wrong. So I figured if they asked, well, now they really want to know. So I told him, I said, well, the first thing is, this is our last meeting. I said, I'm not coming back here anymore. I've been telling myself for weeks that I'm not coming back here anymore. I said, but I'm afraid of my family and the way they're going to think about me, and they're going to judge me, that I'm not trying. And I said, as far as you go, I said, you haven't taught me anything. I think you think that I'm just this unusual specimen, and you want to, try to better understand my screwed up head. He says, well, Kevin, he says, you share with me everything. He says, I thought that was because we had a rapport. I looked and I said, a rapport? I said, look, you're the shrink. If I'm not honest with you, you can't help me. That's the rapport. I don't have any feelings towards you at all. You're not my friend. You're just here to help me. I've given you the information and you haven't given me anything. And I said, so with that, here's your check. It's been nice knowing you. And he said, well, Kevin, I will give you one piece of advice. He says, and I said, what's that? He says, you need to put space between you and your father. I want to tell you something. My father and my wife were very similar. He wouldn't have told me to divorce my wife because he was a Christian counselor. Later on, a pastor actually did tell me that he felt like we needed a divorce. But when he was telling me the truth. I needed to get space between him and me, but I really needed it between my wife as well. But that came many years later. So, well, till next time, have a good day.